Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I am back with some more ancient lore. Today we are back into the mind of Dante Alighieri. This is continuing our journey with the Divine Comedy. This is Paradise, which is the third in the series. This is Canto 11, where we're going to be picking up. If you want to see the beginning, or if you get lost along the way, because I hold some unconventional beliefs, all the beginning and the reference material will be linked into the corner up here and in the box down below, along with the source material. We will do Canto 11 through 17 today. We will read and then discuss. Let us begin. Paradiso, Canto 11. O thou insensate care of mortal men, how inconclusive are the syllogisms that make thee beat thy wings in downward flight. One after law, and one to aphorisms was going, and one following the priesthood, and one to reign by force or sophistry, and one in theft, and one in state affairs, one in the pleasures of the flesh involved, wearied himself, one gave himself to ease. When I, from all of these things emancipate, with Beatrice above there in the heavens, with such exceeding glory was received, when each one had returned unto that point within the circle where it was before, it stood as in a candlestick a candle. And from within the effulgence which at first had spoken unto me, I heard begin, smiling, while it more luminous became. Even as I am kindled in its ray, so looking into the eternal light, the occasion of thy thought I apprehend. Thou doubtest, and wouldst have me to re-sift in language so extended and so open my speech that to thy sense it may be plain, where just before I said, where well one fattens, and where I said there never rose a second, and here 'tis needful we distinguish well. The providence which governeth the world, with counsel wherein all created vision is vanquished ere it reach unto the bottom, so that towards her own beloved might go the bride of him who, uttering a loud cry, espoused her with his consecrated blood. Self-confident and unto him more faithful, two princes did ordain in her behoof, which on this side and that might be her guide. The one was all seraphical in ardor, the other by his wisdom upon earth a splendor was of life cherubical. One will I speak of, for of both is spoken in praising one, whichever may be taken, because unto one end their labors were. Between Tupino and the streams that fall down from the hill elect of the blessed Ubald, a fertile slope of lofty mountain hangs, from which Perugia feels the cold and heat. Through Porto Soleil and behind it weep Gualdo and Noquera the grievous yoke. From out that slope where it breaketh most, its steepness rose upon the world a sun, as this one does sometimes from out the Ganges. Therefore let him who speaketh of that place say not Assisi, for he would say little, but Orient, if he would properly would speak. He was not yet fair distant from his rising before he had begun to make the earth some comfort from his mighty virtue feel. For he in his youth his father's wrath incurred. For certain dame, to whom, as unto death, the gate of pleasure no one doth unlock, and was before his spiritual court, et coram patre, into her united, then day by day more fervently he loved her. She, reft of her first husband, scorned, obscure, 1,100 years and more, waited without a suitor till he came. Naught it availed to hear that with Amallicus found her unmoved at sounding of his voice, he who struck terror into all the world. Naught it availed being constant and undaunted, so that when Mary still remained below, she mounted up with Christ upon the cross. But that too darkly I may not proceed. Francis and poverty, for these two lovers make thou henceforth in my speech diffuse, their concord and their joyous semblances, the love, the wonder, and the sweet regards they made to be the cause of holy thoughts, so much so that the venerable Bernard first bared his feet, and after so great peace ran, and in running thought himself too slow. O wealth unknown, O veritable good, Giles bears his feet, and bears his feet Sylvester, behind the bridegroom, so doth please the bride. Then goes his way that father and that master, he and his lady and that family, which now was girding on the humble cord. Nor cowardice of heart weighed down his brow at being son of Peter Bernardone, nor for appearing marvellously scorned, but regally his hard determination too innocent he opened, and from him received the primal seal upon his order. After the people mendicant increased behind this man, whose admirable life, better in glory of the heavens were sung, and coronated with a second crown, was through honorous by the eternal Spirit the holy purpose of this archimandrite. And when he had, through thirst of martyrdom, in the proud presence of the Sultan preached Christ and the others who came after him, and finding for conversion too unripe the folk, and not to tarry there in vain, returned to fruit of the Italic grass. On the rude rock twixt Tiber and the Arno from Christ did he receive the final seal, which during the whole 2 years his members bore. When he, who chose him unto so much good, was pleased to draw him up to the reward that he had merited by being lowly unto his friars, as to the rightful heirs, his most dear lady did as he recommended, and bade that they should love her faithfully. And from her bosom the illustrious soul wished to depart, returning to its realm, and for its body wished no other bier. Think now what man he, who was a fit companion over the high seas to keep the bark of Peter to its proper bearings. And this man was our patriarch. Hence, whoever doth follow him as he commands can see that he is laden with good merchandise. But for new pasturage his flock has grown so greedy that it is impossible they not be scattered over fields diverse. And in proportion as his sheep, remote and vagabond, go farther off from him, more void of milk do they return to the fold. Verily, some there are that fear a hurt and keep close to the shepherd, but so few that the little cloth doth furnish their hoods, doth furnish forth their hoods. Now, if my utterance be not indistinct, if thine own hearing hath attentive been, if thou recall to mind what I have said, in part content shall thy wishes be. For thou shalt see the plant that's chipped away, and the rebuke that lieth in the words, where well one fattens, if he strayeth not. And so ends Canto 11, and there's not really a whole lot here, right? This is, again, more history than doctrine, right? We're getting the history of this one guy who apparently went to foreign lands and tried before the Sultan to convert them to Christianity, and it didn't turn out so well. So he had to beat feet and head back, and he came back here, and he was a friar, but he wasn't truly content, so he did a couple of other things. And like, it's a nice little history. It's a nice story, but it's not really any meat. I really like Purgatory a lot more than either Hell or Paradise. Paradiso, Canto 12. Soon as the blessed flame had taken up the final word to give it utterance, began the holy millstone to revolve, and in its gyre had not turned wholly round before another in a ring enclosed it, and motion joined to motion, song to song. Song that it greatly doth transcend our muses, our sirens, in those dulcet clarions, as primal splendor that which is reflected. And as our span athwart a tender cloud, two rainbows, parallel and like in color, when Juno to her handmaid gives command. The one without, born of the one within, like to the speaking of that vagrant one whom love consumed, as doth the sun the vapors. And make the people hear, through covenant, God said with Noah, presage of the world, that shall no more be covered with a flood. In such wise of those sempiternal roses, the garlands twain encompassed us about, and thus the outer to the inner, answered. After the dance and other grand rejoicings, both of the singing and the flaming forth, effulgence with effulgence, blithe and tender, together at once with one accord it stopped, even as the eyes that, as volition moves them, must needs together shut and lift themselves. Out of the heart of one of the new lights there came a voice, that needle to the star made me appear in turning thitherward, and it began. The love that makes me fair draws me to speak about the other leader, by whom so well is spoken here of mine. 'Tis right, where one is, to bring in the other, that as they were united in their warfare, together likewise may their glory shine. The soldiery of Christ, which it had cost so dear to arm again, behind the standards moved slow and doubtful, and in numbers few. When the Emperor, who reigneth evermore, provided for the host that was in peril, through grace alone, and not that it was worthy, and as was said, he to his bride brought succor with champions twain, at whose deed and whose word the straggling people were together drawn. Within that region where the sweet west wind rises to open the new leaves, wherewith Europe is seen to clothe herself afresh, not far off from the beatings of the waves, behind which in his long career the sun sometime conceals himself from every man, is situate the fortunate Calhorra, under protection of the mighty shield, in which the lion subject is, and sovereign. Therein was born the amorous paramour of Christian faith, the athlete consecrate, kind to his own and cruel to his foes. And when it was created with his mind replete with such living energy that in his mother, her, it made prophetic, as soon as the espousals were complete between him and the faith at holy font, where they with mutual safety dowered each other, the woman, who for him had given assent, saw in a dream the admirable fruit that issue would from him and from his heirs, and that he might be construed as he was, a spirit from this place went forth to name him, with his possessive, whose he wholly was. Dominic was he called, and him I speak of, even as the husbandman of whom Christ elected to his garden to assist him. In joy and servant sooth he seemed of Christ, for the first love made manifest in him was the first counsel that was given by Christ. Silent and wakeful many a time was he, discovered by his nurse upon the ground, as if he would have said, For this I came. O thou his father, Felix verily, and thou his mother verily, Joanna, if this, interpreted, means as is said. Not for the world which people toil for now, in following those Satians and Taddeo, but through his longing after the true manna, he, in short time, became so great a teacher that he began to go about the vineyard, which fadeth soon, if faithless be the dresser, and of the sea, that once was more benignant unto the righteous poor, though not through itself, but him who sits there and degenerates, not to dispense or 2 or 3 for 6, not any fortune of first vacancy, non decimus qua sunt pomperum Dei, he asked for, but against the errant world permission to do battle for the seed, of which these 24 plants surround thee. Then, with the doctrine and the will together, with office apostolical, he moved, like torrent which some lofty vein outpresses, and in among the shoots heretical, his impetus with greater fury smote, whatever the resistance was the greatest. Of him were made thereafter divers runnels, whereby the garden Catholic is watered, so that more living its plantations stand. If such the one wheel of the Bigot was, in which the Holy Church itself defended, and in the field its civic battle won, truly full manifest should be to thee the excellence of the other, unto whom Thomas so courteous was before my coming. But still the orbit, which the highest part of its circumference made is derelict, so that the mold is where was once the crust. His family, that had straightforward moved with feet upon his footprints, are turned round so that they set the point upon the heel, and soon aware they will be of the harvest of this bad husbandry. When shall the tares complain the granary is taken from them? Yet, say I, he who searcheth leaf by leaf our volume through, would still some page discover where he could read, I am as I am wont. 'Twill not be from Casal nor Aquasparta, from whence came such unto the written words that one avoids it, and the other narrows, Bonaventure of Magnorelio's life. Am I, who always in great offices postpone considerations sinister? Here are Illuminato and Agostino, who of the first barefooted beggars were, that with the cord their friends of God became. Hugh of St. Victor is among them here, and Peter Mangiador, and Peter of Spain, who down below in volumes 12 is shining. Nathan the seer, and Metropolitan Chrysostom, and Anselmus and Donatus, who deigned to lay his hand to the first art. Here is Rabanus, and beside me here shines the Calabrian abbot Joachim, he with the spirit of prophecy endowed. To celebrate so great a paladin have moved me the impassioned courtesy and discreet discourses of Friar Thomas, and with me they have moved the company. And so ends Canto 12. And again, we have more history than esoterica, and there is definitely the possibility that I do not have a key, right? I am missing keys to unlock what these things mean, because he is calling out specific instances in history, and he's calling names of people that have, in large part, been lost to antiquity, right? We know some of these stories. We don't know all of these stories, and so he assumes that you will know some of these stories. It's like reading through the Old Testament and not having the book of Enoch. They assume that you do. They assume that you have the book of the Chronicles of Kings and the stories that are associated that we really don't. Right? It is an assumption that they make that you have access to these things, and it's the same thing here. He has the assumption that you have access to it. Well, 100 to 200 years later, we had the Reformation. This was just after the schism of the church from the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholics, and the Eastern Orthodox, right? So they have just separated. And here in about 200 years, Martin Luther's going to nail some paper to the wall. And then a whole brand new thing happens. Right? And so this is a very transitional type of thing. And at this point right here, right, the last canto, 11, he was talking about the foundation of the church. This one he's talking about the degradation of the church and how it is falling off. And that is interesting because this is a tour of heaven, and you're getting some of the things that are going wrong in the church and how they are going wrong. And that's interesting. It's a little bit more detail than we've had for some of the other histories. So it is definitely an interesting read, right? But there's still parts of it we don't have. And maybe it is entirely possible that if you have the key, it reads different, right? Well, we had the key for purgatory, and so the whole book read differently. There might be a key missing here. I am perfectly willing to admit that I don't have all the keys. I have some of the keys, and they work. The ones I have, I know they work. So they're literally working for me. So let's check out 13. Paradiso, Canto 13. Let him imagine who would well conceive what now I saw, and let him, while I speak, retain the image as a steadfast rock. The 15 stars, that in their diverse regions the sky enliven with a light so great that it transcends all clusters of the air. Like that. That's got to be a key, but I don't have that key. Let him in the wane imagine unto which our vault of heaven sufficeth night and day, so that in turning of its pole it fails night. Now, this might be sacred geometry, this might be zodiac, right? It seems to be leaning towards zodiac, but sacred geometry and zodiac are intertwined. Let him in the way, oh wait. Let him in the mouth imagine of the horn, that in the point beginneth of the axis, round about which the primal wheel revolves. To have fashioned of themselves two signs in heaven, like unto that which Minos' daughter made, the moment when she felt the frost of death. And one to have its rays within the other, and both to whirl themselves in such a manner that one should forward go and the other backward. And he will have some shadowing forth of that true constellation, and the double dance that circled round the point at which I was, because it is much beyond our wont, as swifter than the motion of the Chiana moveth the heaven, that all the rest outspeeds. There saying they neither Bacchus nor Apollo, but in the divine nature persons three, and in one person the divine and human. The singing and the dance fulfilled their measure, and unto us those holy lights gave need, growing in happiness from care to care. Then broke the silence of those saints concordant, to light in which the admirable life of God's own mendicant was told to me, and said, now that one straw is trodden out, now that its seed is garnered up already, sweet love invites me to thresh out the other, into that bosom, thou believest, whence was drawn the rib to form the beauteous cheek, whose taste to all the world is costing dear, and into that which by the lance transfixed before incense such satisfaction made, that it weighs down the balance of all sin. Whatever of light it has to human nature been lawful to possess was all infused by the same power that both of them created. And hence, at what I said above dost wonder, when I narrated that no second had the good which in the fifth light is enclosed. Now, open thy eyes to what I answer thee, and thou shalt see thy creed and my discourse fit in the truth as center in a circle. That which can die and that which dieth not are nothing but the splendor of the idea, which by his love and our Lord brings into being. Because that living light, from which its fount effulgent flows, so that it disunites not from him, nor from the love in them entwined, through its own goodness reunites its rays in nine substances, as in a mirror, itself eternally remaining one. Thence it descends to the last potencies, downward from act to act, becoming such that only brief contingencies it makes. And these contingencies I hold to be things generated which the heaven produces by its own motion, without seed and without neither their wax nor that which tempers it, remains immutable, and hence beneath the ideal signet more and less shines through. Therefore it happens that the self-same tree, after its kind, bears worse and better fruit, are ye born with characters diverse. If in perfection tempered were the wax, and were the heaven in its supremest virtue, the brilliance of the seal would all appear. But nature gives it ever more deficient in the like manner, working as the artist, who has the skill of art and hand that trembles. If then the fervent love, the vision clear, of primal virtue do dispose and seal, perfection absolute is there acquired. Thus was of the old the earth created worthy, of all and every animal perfection, and thus the virgin was impregnate made. So that thine own opinion I commend, that human nature never yet has been, nor will be, what it was in those two persons. Now, if no further forth I should proceed, then in what way was he without a peer, would be the first beginning of thy words. But that may well appear what now appears not. Think who he was, and what occasion moved him to make his request when it was told him, ask. I've not so clearly spoken that thou canst not see. I've not spoken that thou canst not see. Clearly he was a king who asked for wisdom, that he might be sufficiently a king. 'Twas not to know the number in which are the motors here above, or if necessary with the contingent ever necessary make. Non si este dare premium motem esse, or if in semicircle can be made triangle, so that it have no right angle. Whence, if thou notice this, then what I said, a regal prudence is that peerless seeing in which the shaft of my intention strikes. If on rose thou turnest thy clear eyes, thou wilt see that it has reference alone to kings, who are many, and the good are rare. With this distinction take thou what I said, and thus it can consist with thy belief of the first Father and of our delight, and led shall this be always to thy feet, to make thee, like a weary man, move slowly, both to the yes and no, thou seest not. For very low among the fools is he who affirms without distinction, or denies as well in one as in the other case, because it happens that full often bends current opinion in the false direction, and then the feelings bind the intellect. Far more than uselessly he leaves the shore, since he returneth not the same he went, who fishes for the truth and has no skill. And in the world proofs manifest thereof, Parmenides, Melesius, Brisius are, and many who went on and knew not whither. Thus did Sibelius, Arius, and those fools who have been even as swords unto the Scriptures, in rendering distorted their straight faces. Nor yet shall people be too confident in judging, even as he who doth count the corn in field, and ever it be ripe. For I have seen all winter long the thorn first show itself intractable and fierce, and after bear the rose upon its top. And I have seen a ship direct and swift run over the sea throughout its course entire, to perish at the harbor's mouth at last. Let not Dame Bertha nor Sir Martin think, seeing one steal, another offering make, see them in the arbitrament divine. For one may rise and fall, the other may. And so ends Canto 13. 13. And so this one does have some esoterica in it, and it is much easier to follow the intentions of this by reading through the Kabbalion or going into Hermes Trismegistus at all. But this is talking about mindset and becoming the better, right? It says that there's a lot of people who rule, and most of them are not good at it. Most of them never seek the knowing more of, right? That is the goal, to become more than, to be better than yesterday, a year ago, 10 years ago, to be on a constant cycle of progression. That is the path to enlightenment. It is both on a physical level with the meat suit, it is a decision level on the soul level, and it is on a spirit level of the becoming. It is the Trinity into one, right? Which is also described in here. It is also described in here both astrology and sacred geometry, which is definitely interesting. I am going to be getting more into some sacred geometry stuff. Like I'm working out the mechanics on how to do that, but that's coming. Because it is a fundamental, right? One of the fundamental building blocks of manifestation is sacred geometry in a very real way. All right, next up, Paradiso, Canto 14, and check out the other stuff for a better way of looking at all of this. Like it's a lot more clear in the other stuff. This is very mixed in and harder to peel out. Paradiso, Canto 14. From center unto rim, from rim to center, in a round vase the water moves itself, as from without 'tis struck, or from within. In my mind upon a sudden dropped what I am saying at the moment when silent became the glorious life of Thomas, because of the resemblance that was born of his discourse and that of Beatrice, whom, after him, it pleased us to begin. This man has need, and does not tell you so, nor with the voice, nor even in his thought, of going to the root of one truth more. Declare unto him if the light wherewith blossoms your substance shall remain with you, essentially the same that it is now. And if it do remain, say in what manner, after ye are again made visible, it can be that it injure not your sight. As by a greater gladness urged and drawn, they who are dancing in a ring sometimes uplift their voices, and their motions quicken, so that at that horizon devout and prompt, the holy circles a new joy displayed in their revolving and their wondrous song. Whoso lamenteth him that here we die, that we may live above, has never there seen the refreshment of the eternal reign. The one and two and three, whoever liveth and reigneth ever in three and two and one, not circumscribed in all things, circumscribing. Three several times was chanted by each one among those spirits with such melody that for all merit it were just reward. And in the lustre most divine of all, the lesser ring, I heard a modest voice, such as, perhaps, the angels' was to Mary, answer, as long as the festivity of paradise shall be, so long our love shall radiate round about us such a vesture. Its brightness is proportioned to the ardor to the vision, and the vision equals what grace it has above its worth. When glorious and sanctified, our flesh is reassumed, then shall our persons be more pleasing by their being all complete. For will increase whatever bestows on us of light gratuitous, the good supreme light which enables us to look on him. Therefore the vision must perforce increase the ardor from which that is kindled, increase the radiance which from this proceeds. But even as a coal that sends forth flame, and by its vivid whiteness overpowers it, so that its own appearance it maintains, thus the effulgence that surrounds us now shall be overpowered in aspect by the flesh, which still to-day the earth doth cover up. Nor can so great a splendor weary us, for strong will be the organs of the body to everything which hath the power to please us. So sudden and alert appeared to me, both one and the other choir to say Amen, that well they showed desire for their dead bodies, nor soul for them perhaps, but for their mothers, their fathers, and the rest who had been dear, or ever they became eternal flames. And lo, all round about of equal brightness arose a lustre over what was there, like a horizon that is clearing up, and as at rise of early eve begins among the welkin new appearances, so that the sight seems real and unreal. It seemed to me that new subsistences began there to be seen and make a circle outside the other two circumferences. O very sparkling of the Holy Spirit, how sudden and incandescent it became unto mine eyes that vanquished bore it not. But Beatrice, so beautiful and smiling, appeared to me, and that with other sights that followed not my memory I must leave her. Then, to uplift themselves, mine eyes resumed the power, and I beheld myself translated to higher salvation with my lady only. Well was I aware that I was more uplifted by the enkindled smiling of the star that seemed to me more ruddy than its wont. With all my heart, and in that dialect which is the same in all, such holocaust to God I made that as the new grace beseemed. And not yet from my bosom was exhausted the ardor of sacrifice before I knew this offering was accepted and auspicious. For with so great a lustre and so red splendors appeared to me in twofold rays. I said, O Helios, who dost so adorn them? Even as distinct with less and greater lights glimmers between the two poles of the world, the galaxy, that maketh wise men doubt. Thus, constellated in the depths of Mars, those rays described the venerable sign, that quadrants joining a circle make. Here doth my memory overcome my genius, for on that cross as living gleamed forth Christ, so that I cannot find ensample worthy. But he who takes his cross and follows Christ again will pardon me what I omit, seeing in that aurora lighten Christ. From horn to horn, and twixt the top and base, lights were in motion, brightly scintillating, as they together met and passed each other. Thus, level and aslant, and swift and slow, we were behold, renewing still the sight, the particles of bodies long and short. Across the sunbeam move wherewith is listed, sometimes the shade, which for their own defence people with cunning and with art contrive, and as lute and harp, accorded, strong with many strings, a dulcet tinkling make, to him by whom the notes are not distinguished. So, from the lights that there to me appeared, upgathered through the cross a melody, which rapt me, not distinguishing the hymn. Well was I aware of it was lofty laud, because there came to me, arise and conquer, as unto him who hears and comprehends not. So much enamored I became therewith, that until then was not anything that ever had fettered me with such sweet bonds. Perhaps my word appears somewhat too bold, postponing the delight of those fair eyes, into which gazing my desire has rest. But who bethinks him that the living seals of every beauty grow in power, ascending, and that I there had not turned round to those? Can me excuse if myself accuse, to excuse myself, and see that I speak truly, for there the holy joy is not disclosed. Because ascending it becomes more pure. And so ends 14. And again, there are things here that are better explained in other places, right? This is somewhat of the seeking of nirvana, somewhat of paradise, nirvana, however you want to call it. It's all the same. Enlightenment. I don't know. I don't know what I don't know. And some of this is absolutely just to placate the Catholic Church. And some of it, they just don't care what the Catholic Church thinks. And it's really weird how that breaks down. Now, granted, this was a long time ago. They just had the schism. So there was a lot of differentiation in the area already about what the beliefs were. There were still encompassing the pagan beliefs into Christianity. And so it was still becoming, in many ways, what we have today. But again, this was right before the Reformation. So these thoughts and things were coming into being even then. Right? When he talks about looking into the heavens and that makes a man wonder, that is a very real thing. Right? When you actually spend the time to contemplate the heavens, right, to get out at night and to look at the stars and really wrap your mind around the scale of that. Now, there are people who like to think that the earth is flat and there's this dome and all of these lights are just affixed into the dome. There's no easy way to say this, but you're wrong. I personally have seen the curvature of the earth. I have been involved with the technology that is involved with sending things into space. I know the things that y'all talk about are not real. So for me, I don't have to spend time debunking things that I know are not true. I don't get into the whole flat earth thing because it is pointless. There is no need to discuss it. Here, he's telling you that the earth is not flat in 1300. Right? Obviously, if you look at the heavens, then you will be drawn to globe. Because globe is the only thing that works. It's the only thing that works because physics is real. Physics is how God makes things happen. I have zero problems reconciling that. If you do, that's your belief system getting in the way. Anyway, let's get into Canto 15. a will benign, in which reveals itself ever the love that righteously inspires, as in the iniquitous cupidity, silence imposed upon that dulcet lyre, and quieted the consecrated chords that heaven's right hand doth tighten and relax. How unto just entreaties shall be deaf those substances which, to give me desire of praying them with one accord, grew silent. 'Tis well that without end he should lament, who for the love of things that doth not last eternally despoils him of that love. As through the pure and tranquil evening air there shoots from time to time a sudden fire, moving the eyes that steadfast were before, and seems to be a star that changeth place, except that in the part where it is kindled nothing is missed, and this endureth little. So from the horn that to the right extends, unto that cross's foot there ran a star, out of the constellation shining there. Nor was this gem dissevered from its ribbon, but down the radiant fillet ran along, so that fire seemed it behind alabaster. Thus piteous did Anchises' shade reach forward, if any faith our greatest muse deserved, when in Elysium he his son perceived. O sanguis meus, O superinfusus gratia de securitia tibi, que bis uquanam coele janua reclusia. That thus that effulgence which I gave it heed, then round upon my lady turned my sight, and on this side and that was stupefied. For in her eyes was burning such a smile, that with mine own methought I touched the bottom, both of my grace and of my paradise. Then, pleasant to the hearing and the sight, the spirit joined to its beginning things. I understood not, so profound it spake, nor did it hide itself from me by choice, but by necessity, for its conception above the mark of mortals sets itself. And when the bow of burning sympathy was so far slackened, with that its speech descended towards the mark of our intelligence, the first thing that was understood by me was, Benedict be thou, O trine in one, who hast unto my seed so courteous been. And it continued, hunger long and grateful, drawn from the readings of the mighty volume, wherein is never changed the white nor dark. Thou hast appeased my son within this light, in which I speak to thee, by grace of her, who to this lofty flight with plumage clothed thee. Thou thinkest that to me thy thought doth pass, from him who is first, as from the unit, if that be known, if that be known, ray out of the 5 and 6. And therefore, who am I that thou askest not, and why I seem more joyous unto thee than any other of this gladsome crowd? Thou think'st this the truth, because the small and great of this existence look in the mirror, wherein, before thou think'st, thou thought thou showest, but that the sacred love, in which I watch with perpetuate sight perpetual, and which makes me thirst with sweet desire, may be better fulfilled. Now, let thy voice secure and frank and glad proclaim the wishes and desire proclaim, to which my answer is decreed already. To Beatrice I turned me, and she heard, before I spake, and smiled to me a sign that made the wings of my desire increase. Then, in this wise began I, love and knowledge, when on you dawned the first equality of the same weight, for each of you became. For in the sun, which lighted you and burned with heat and radiance, so they so equal are, that all similitudes are insufficient. But among mortals will and argument, for reasons that to you is manifest, diversely feathered in their pinions are. Whence I, who mortal am, feel in myself this inequality. So give not thanks, save in my heart, for this paternal welcome. Truly do I entreat thee, living topaz, set in this precious jewel as a gem, that thou wilt satisfy me with thy name. O leaf of mine, in whom I pleasure took, even while awaiting I was thine own root. Such a beginning he in answer made me. Then said to me, that one from whom is named thy race, and who 100 years and more has circled round the mount on the first cornice, a son of mine, and thy great-grandsire was. Well it behooves thee that the long fatigue thou shouldst for him make shorter with thy works. Florence, within the ancient boundary, from which she taketh still her tears and nuns, abode in quiet, temperate, and chaste. No golden chain she had, nor coronal, nor lady shod with sandal shoon, nor girdle, that caught the eye more than the person did. Not yet. The daughter at her birth struck fear into the father, for the time and dower did not overrun this side or that the measure. No houses had she void of families, nor not yet had thither come Sardanapalus, to show what in a chamber can be done. Not yet surpassed had Montalmalo been, by your Usilajatojo, which surpassed shall in its downfall be as in its rise. Valencian Bertie saw I go begirt with leather and with bone, and from the mirror his dame depart without a painted face. Of him and him of Nerli saw, and him of Vecchio, contented with their simple suits and buffs, and with the spindle and the flax their dames. O fortunate women, and each one was certain of her own burial place, and none as yet, for the sake of France, was in her bed deserted. One over the cradle kept her studious watch, and in her lullaby the language used, the first delights, the fathers and the mothers. Another, drawing tresses from her distaff, told over among her family the tales of Trojans, and of Thessaly and Rome. As great a marvel then would have been held a Lapus Saltarello, a Ciangala, as Cincinnatus or Cornelia now. To such a quiet, such a beautiful life of the citizen, to such a safe community, and to so sweet an end did Mary give me, with loud cries invoked, and in your ancient baptistry at once Christian and Casiaguido I became. Maranto was my brother, and Eliseo from Val de Pato came to me, my wife, and from that place thy surname was derived. I followed afterwards the Emperor Conrad, and he begirt me of his chivalry. So much I pleased him with my noble deeds. I followed in his train against that law's iniquity, whose people doth usurp your just possession, although your pastor's fault. There, by that execrable race was I released from the bonds of the fallacious world, the love of which defiles many souls, and came from martyrdom unto this place. And so ends 15, and again we're getting some history. Right? There's a little bit of enlightenment in this, but you really have to dig for it. And so I'm not even going to bother breaking it down and really talking about it. You're much better served for this part of the discourse to be doing the Kabbalion, right? Paradise was good, or purgatory was good. Like, it was a good analogy for coming up through. This is a little more complicated, a little less meaty. Just like hell was. I think purgatory was the slip in. Paradiso, Canto 16. And this is where we're going to wrap up. I think I said 17, but it's going to be 16. This makes 6, so I think. O thou, our poor nobility of blood, if thou dost make the people glory in thee, down here where our affection languishes, a marvelous thing it never will be to me. For there, where appetite is not perverted, I say in heaven, of thee I made a boast. Truly, thou art a cloak that quickly shortens, so that unless we piece thee day by day, time goeth round about thee with his shears. With you, which Rome was first to tolerate, wherein her family less she perseveres, yet once again my words beginning made. whence Beatrice, who stood somewhat apart, smiling, appeared like unto her who coughed at the first failing writ of Guinevere, and began, I began, you are my ancestor. You gave me all the hardihood to speak. You lift me so that I am more than I. So many rivulets with gladness fill my mind that of itself it makes a joy, because it can endure this and not burst. Then tell me, my beloved root ancestral, who were your ancestors, and what the years that in your boyhood chronicled themselves? Tell me about the sheepfold of St. John, how large it was, and who the people were within it, worthy of the highest seats. As at the blowing of the winds a coal quickens to flame, so I beheld that light become resplendent at my blandishments, and as unto my eyes it grew more fair, with voice more sweet and tender, but not in this modern dialect, it said to me, from uttering of Ave till the birth in which my mother, who is now a saint, of me was lightened, who had been her burden. Unto his lion had this fire returned 550 times, and 30 more, to re-inflame itself beneath his paw. My ancestors and I our birthplace had, where first is found the last ward of the city, by him who runneth in your annual game. Suffice it of my elders to hear this, but who they were, and whence they thither came, silence is more considerate than speech. All those who at that time were there between Mars and the Baptist, fit for bearing arms, were a fifth part of those who are living. But the community that now is mixed with Campi and Certadalo and Figascini, pure in the lowest artisan was seen. Oh, how much better 'twere to have as neighbors the folk of whom I speak, and at Galuzzo and at Trespiano have your boundary, than have them in the town and bear the stench of Aguileone's churl, and him of Signa, who has sharp eyes for trickery already. Had not the folk which most of the world degenerates been a stepdame unto Caesar, but as a mother to her son benignant. Some who turned Florentines and trade and discount would have gone back again to Semifonte, there where their grandfathers went about as beggars. At Montemoloro still would be the counts, the Cerci, and the Paris of Assone. Perhaps in Valdegrieve, in Buondelmonte, ever the intermingling of the people has been the source of malady in cities, as in the body food it surfeits on, and a blind bull more headlong plunges down than a blind lamb, and very often cuts better and more a single sword than 5. If Luni thou regard, and others Bisaglia, how they have passed away, and how are passing Chusi and Sinigaglia after them. To hear how races waste themselves away will seem to thee no novel thing nor hard, seeing that even cities have an end. All things of yours have their mortality, even as yourselves, but it is hidden in some that a long while endure, and lives are short. And as the turning of the lunar heaven covers and bears the shores without a pause, and in the like manner fortune does with Florence. Therefore should not appear a marvelous thing what I shall say of the great Florentines, of whom the fame is hidden in the past. I saw the Ugi, and the Cantillini, Filippi, Greci, Oramani, and Alberici, even in their fall illustrious citizens, and saw, as mighty as the ancient were, with him of La Sanella, him of Arica, and Soldianer, Ardinghi, and Bostici, near to the gate that is at present laden with a new felon of so much weight, that soon it shall be jetsam from the bark. The Ravenagni were, and from whom descended the Count Guido, and whoever the name of the great Belliccioni since hath taken. He of La Presa knew the art of ruling already, and already Galligaggio had hilt and pommel gilded in his house. Mighty already was the column Ver, Sacchetti, Guaffici, Fifont, and Barucci, and Galli, and they who for the bushel blush. The stock from which were the Calfucci born was great already, and already chosen to cerule chairs, the Sizzi and Araguchi. And how beheld I those who are undone by their own pride, and how the balls of gold Florence enflowered in all their mighty deeds. So likewise did the ancestors of those who, evermore, when vacant is your church, fatten by staying in consistory. The insolent race, that like a dragon follows whoever flees, and unto him that shows his teeth or purse is gentle as a lamb. Already rising was, but from low people, so that it pleased not Ubertin Donato that his wife's father should make him their kin. Already had Capanasaclo to the market from Fasole descended, and already Guido and Infangato were good burgers. I'll tell a thing incredible but true. One entered the small circuit by a gate, which from the Della Pera took its name. Each one that bears the beautiful escutcheon of the great baron whose renown and name the festival of Thomas keepeth afresh. Knighthood and privilege from him received, though with the populace unites himself today the man who binds it with a border. Already were Gualterotti and Importuni, and still more quiet would the Borgo be, if with new neighbors it had remained unfed. The house from which is born your lamentation, through just disdain that death among you brought, and put an end to your joyous life, was honored in itself and in its companions of Buondelmonte. How in evil hour thou fledst the bridle at another's promptings. Many would be rejoicing who were sad if God had thee surrendered to the Ema, the first time that thou camest to the city. But it behooved the mutilated stone which guards the bridge that Florence should provide a victim in her latest hour of peace. With all these families and others with them, Florence beheld I in so great repose that no occasion had she whence to sleep, to weep. With all these families beheld so just and glorious her people, that the lily never upon the spear was placed reversed, nor by division was vermilion made. And so ends Canto 16, and where we will begin our wrap-up. And again, this is history, right? This is deep Italian history. This is probably of use to scholars, because there is listed a whole lot of people and the places from which they come in some instances. And so I am sure that somebody somewhere will be able to dig into this deeply enough to understand exactly where these people and places were, but it is not important to me, right? I'm sure that there is history here that is actually important, but again, not enough for me to go look for it. So it's good to see it. In hell, we actually got some things that I might look up. In this one, not so much, right? These people were, for the most part, Catholics doing Catholic things, and that to me is just not something I care to associate with. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a series of somewhat difficult topics. I know I didn't have a whole lot to add to this one, but that's okay. We're reading through it. We're getting the record down, right? We're doing the things so that we know what we're talking about when we talk about the things. We're doing that for many things, right? We're doing the Agenda 47 thing for that reason. We did Project 2025 for that reason. We went through the Kabbalion for that reason. We want to know what we're talking about when we actually talk about these things. And so we can. We can read through it, and we're going to do that. If you like what I'm doing here, let me know down below. If you would like sharing this up, throw me a comment. If I agree, if you agree, if you do or don't, let me know. If it stays respectful, it gets to stay up. If you really like what I'm doing, hit that super thanks. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you were here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt's Take. Peace.